Greetings, Trekkies and Trekkers. Thank you so much for your continued support, and welcome to another edition of Remembering Star Trek. Now, of course, you may notice the background is different and that's because, well, I'm at my home. Not my apartment phone, but I'm actually at my actual home. Of course, I'm here for spring break and and I apologize for the light right there. It's just, the angle from where I'm sitting at, so there you go. But yeah, so today, Remembering Star Trek continues with Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Now, this movie represents a lot of lasts in the Star Trek franchise. This is the last movie to feature the original cast all together. It marks the last time Nicholas Meyer ever directed a Star Trek movie, sadly enough. And this also marks the last time that we ever see the Enterprise A on the big screen. So there you go. So basically the plot of this movie is basically like the Berlin Wall coming down in space. The Federation and the Klingons, after years of fighting, they decided, we're gonna, the Klingons are gonna extend an olive branch to the Federation, and they're finally gonna talk peace terms, which to me is probably one of the best things about this movie. It takes inspiration from things that were going on in real life, in the real world, and this movie does that perfectly, and I love it. I really do. So yeah, everything about this movie is just perfect. But yeah, it's just a really, really well thought out, well written movie. And like I said, well, it's not my favorite of the Star Trek movies. That, of course, is Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. This one definitely is a close second. I love this movie so much. So yes, this is definitely my second favorite Star Trek movie. With, of course, as I said before, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home being my number one favorite. So there you go. And yeah, so there you go, basically. Yeah. So, besides from the plot, what else do I love about this movie? Well, I love that it's like a political thriller mixed in with a murder mystery. You combine those two together and you get Star Trek VI. And this movie really does a great job at mixing the two genres together. It's just amazing and I love it. And I also love the fact that this movie is basically it basically is the closure of Kirk's character arc throughout these movies. Well, the good ones anyway. And including Star Trek 8. In Star Trek 2 you have him meeting his son. In Star Trek 3 his son dies. In Star Trek 4, he's still mourning over a bit, and then in Star Trek 6 he comes to realize that his prejudice against the Klingons has been wrong this whole time, and he changes it, and because he changes, everyone else's perspective in the movie changes, and that's great. And Kirk even says towards the end of the movie that he was afraid of change, and that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Everyone's afraid of like status quo changing and da 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 da. But if you learn to accept change and embrace it, then your entire perspective on things changes, and that's what I liked about Kirk in this movie. His perspective about the Klingons changes. His prejudice towards them changes, and by the movie it's completely gone. He has no more prejudice or biases at all against Klingons, and it was because he saw Chancellor Gorkon die that his perspective changed, and that was great, and that's one of the things I loved about this movie. It's really great. But yeah, and another thing I liked about this movie was the whole Shakespeare element that was going on, especially through General Chang, played by the amazingly talented Christopher Plummer. He's definitely one of my favorite actors of all time. But yeah, everything about this movie is just amazing, and this movie definitely makes up for the horrid awfulness of Star Trek V in spades. It was great. So is there anything negative or nitpicky I can say about this movie? No, there really isn't. I think the reason why is because, this movie did so well that ultimately, the future of the franchise was basically saved because of this movie. It did so well at the box office and da 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 da. That, of course, then eventually they made movies featuring the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation, and that was just amazing. And to me personally, I think that this movie is great. If this had been the last Star Trek movie ever, it would have been awesome. But sadly, that didn't happen. But of course, as well known, that didn't happen. So there you go. But yeah. Let's see here. And yes, I also liked the cast members. The cast member signatures. It was them like signing off and stuff like that. Well, except for, of course, William Shatner, James doing it, and Walter Koenig. They were in Star Trek Generations, but we're going to talk about that next week, so there you go. But anyway, like I said, this movie is great. I absolutely love it. It's definitely my second favorite film in the entirety of the Star Trek franchise. Yeah, it's just great. Everything about it is awesome. The music is great. The production design of this movie is fantastic. The location shooting they did for the planet Repente, it's amazing. It looks really, really great. Even today, everything about this movie is fantastic. The plot still holds up even today. The effects hold up. Everything about this movie holds up still today. It's utterly fantastic, and kudos to you, Nicholas Meyer, for directing a very, very great movie. Just like what he did with Star Trek 2, Nicholas Meyer, once again, knocked it out of the park with this one. Fantastic. Absolutely loved it. I wish that he would have directed I really wish he would have directed Star Trek Into Darkness, but sadly that didn't happen, so, oh well then. But yeah, so that is all I have to say about Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. So, next week, Remembering Star Trek will continue with the first film in the Star Trek TNG film franchise, and that, of course, is Star Trek Generations. And that will be happening next week. So, thank you guys so much for your continued support. I seriously could not do what I do without you. And don't forget, next week, Remembering Star Trek will continue with Star Trek Generations. So until then, have a great day, live long and prosper.